You have to be kidding me. That is impossible. That is absolutely impossible what he just did. That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Stopped by Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala to the rim. Oh, great block. James out of nowhere, skies to the right.
You've got Marshawn Lynch in the backfield. You've got a guy that's been borderline unstoppable in this part of the field.
Steps into it. Pass is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win
it! Alright, let's do a little ASMR hard crack. Right into the microphone. How's everybody doing? Welcome back. Week 3's in the books. Hold on. That's good stuff right there. Let me tell you. That shit's fucking great. I'll tell you what's not fucking great. How I'm doing in the predictions. What the fuck? Oh, it's the seltzer in the shot right there. I'm not doing great in the predictions so far this year. I think that's pretty clear and obvious. Not doing terribly. But Week 1, I started off really, really well. Week 2 was okay. Week 3 I had the same exact record as Week 2. Week 2, I started off, like I said, Week 1, I started off great, and I was shooting headshots, man, nailing these games. But this year, man, between injuries and just unpredicted shots out of the cannon for different players and different teams taking off and looking great and exceeding expectations, and other teams not necessarily meeting expectations so far through 3 weeks. It's been a really hard season to predict, but I'm not doing too terribly. Welcome back, everybody, to Locker Room Takes, where I incriminate myself on a weekly basis with my absolutely terrible sports takes, including my takes on on Sam Darnold, who I said was terrible, and he's out here balling, might be the MVP through 3 weeks. Or when I tell you Joe Burrow is definitively the second best quarterback in football, and here he is playing like dog shit. But we'll get to that. Let's get right into it. You guys know me, I'm not a big intro guy. I want to talk about the fact that I went 8-8 2 weeks in a row on my game picks. That puts me at 28 wins, 20 losses on my predictions. That ain't too great. I mean, I'm not... Week 1 really helped me out. And I do think that as the season goes, it's just going to improve. And, yeah, dude, the last 2 weeks just weren't too good. Let's get into the picks really quick. Talk about which games I got right, which games I got wrong. And I'll dive deeply into some of the games. Aaron Rodgers and the Jets looked like what we've been hoping they were going to look like for forever now. And they did it against a team that they should have bullied, and they did bully them. They beat the San Francisco 49ers, the New England Patriots pretty soundly. And really, it's the first time that the Jets have looked solid at quarterback. Not just promising or, oh, the kid's young and he had some flashes. No, now they look solid at quarterback. Aaron Rodgers looks back into playing shape, and they get the win. So I got that prediction correct. Next on the slate was the 1 o'clock games, and we started with that being the Giants, and the Cleveland Browns. I'm a Giants fan. I said to you guys that there might not be a single time this season that I picked the Giants to win a game. Until proven otherwise, I'm going to continue to do that despite the fact that I got this game wrong. I said the Browns are going to win this one, and the Giants did. And despite the score, they actually won it pretty convincingly. And Malik Nabers is, man, he makes me excited and hopeful that we'll actually get a quarterback that can get him the ball. Not that Daniel Jones isn't, because Daniel Jones has played really well the last 2 weeks, but I'm not going to play into this narrative of Daniel Jones being a good quarterback. I'm just not going to do it. I didn't even do it when they made the playoffs the 1 year they did with Brian Daboll as the coach for the first season, and I was like, this is an anomaly. This is not going to happen again. I just didn't believe it, and I still don't. So I got that game wrong, 1-1. Chicago and Indianapolis, I thought Chicago was going to bounce back. They didn't. Indianapolis, I don't think, is that great of a team, even though going into the season I had high expectations for them. The first 2 weeks were offensively in week 1, they looked great. They looked horrible against Green Bay. And they didn't look great necessarily against the Bears, but they were able to do some stuff offensively that was impressive. I will say, Caleb Williams improved in this game. He was really more or less the same in the majority of the first half of the game. But in the second half, when the pressure started coming on, and it was looking like they didn't have a chance in this game, he played very well down the stretch. Those 2 picks were bad picks, and he's going to clean that stuff up. But right now, he's a rookie, and he's trying to figure it out. Each week, he has made big improvements, and I think this is his biggest one. We'll see what we get moving forward from Caleb Williams, specifically at offensive line. I'm going to talk about the Bears' offensive line probably all year long. I'm not trying to make excuses. They don't seem to really know what their identity is on offense. And I think, well, I just knocked the camera over, excuse me. And I think that DeAndre Swift just simply is not playing up to standards. He's not hitting open lanes the way a running back is supposed to. And I think that that's just an ode to Philadelphia. They made Miles Sanders a Pro Bowler. They made DeAndre Swift look like a Pro Bowler. That offensive line and that scheme, run game-wise, just knows how to make running backs look great, and now Saquon Barkley is making me look really smart for calling him my future offensive player of the year for this year. Eagles know how to run the ball. Chicago usually does, but DeAndre Swift's just simply not hitting those holes. DeAndre Swift in Chicago looks like he did on the Lions, which wasn't that impressive at all. So I got that game wrong. Indianapolis ends up winning that game. Another game I got wrong. Here we go. Texans and the Vikings. I think this says so much more about the Vikings than it does the Texans. And I'm not just trying to say that to defend the fact that last week I had Houston as my number 2 team in the league. I think if you look at the body of work so far this season for Minnesota, they have brutalized all 3 opponents. Now, the Giants, we expected that. However, the Giants have not looked as bad against other teams. They should have beaten Washington, and they did beat Cleveland, albeit neither of those 2 teams are going to wow you at all. But I don't think the Giants have looked as bad as we originally anticipated them being, and the Vikings handled business against them. They also obliterated the 49ers, and I don't care what you say, injuries or not, obliterating the 49ers is very impressive. Then they obliterated the Texans, who are 2 weeks in a row they beat the team that going into that week I had the number 2 team in the NFL. And they obliterated them. And I don't think that that's because the Texans are bad or fraudulent. I actually think it's because the Vikings might actually be that good. I really do. We'll see how that plays out, but I got that game wrong. Moving on finally to a game I got right was Philadelphia and New Orleans. Last week when I did my game picks, I was telling you this game was gonna show you which of these 2 teams is the fraud here, who's the fake, who's the pretender, if you will. And I do think that the way that it turned out was the right way, the way that it should have turned out. Philadelphia won the game, and it was definitely, this whole game turned out kind of the opposite of what I predicted aside from the winner. Both of these teams have arguably, let's say, porous defenses, really. And mostly Philadelphia having a poor defense, but New Orleans had up to that point a phenomenal offense. They were scoring on everybody, and they scored on almost every drive so far this season. But they ended up going and facing Philly, who, again, has a defense that you think they would have exploited and really couldn't do a whole hell of a lot for the majority of this game. Philadelphia won the game, but you got to give the game ball. There's no doubt you give the game ball to Saquon Barkley. He's the reason you won that game, and I think he's going to continue to be the reason you win continuing on this season. And right now, with the way that NFC East looks, the Philadelphia Eagles might look like the strongest team in that division right now. Maybe, and listen, I understand that that's not saying a whole hell of a lot, but to me it is. Let me just type something in here really quick. Go back. So I got that game right. One game that I got wrong was the Chargers and the Steelers, and I want to put an asterisk on this one. Not making any excuses. The Steelers played well. Justin Fields is playing well. All the way around, they seem like a well-coached, well-oiled machine. Obviously, the defense is fantastic, and that's what they've always been known for in Pittsburgh, something they've always done solidly. But they know how to run the football. They know how to play defense. The Chargers know how to run the football, know how to play defense, but in this game, they lost a lot of key players around halftime to the point where, Pittsburgh outscored them 10-0 in the second half. I think if these injuries didn't affect the Chargers, I don't think it would have gone down that way. So as much as it is a good win and an impressive win for the Steelers, and the Steelers off to a 3-0 start is very good for them, I don't want to put too much stock in this win. Not necessarily that I don't want to put stock in the Steelers. I'm hesitant a little bit on calling them one of the best teams in the league, even though they're playing like it. I'm also very hesitant to discredit the Chargers too much because I think that the injuries in this game is ultimately the reason why they didn't pull it through, because I think had they been healthy that would have been the case. But I did get that game wrong ultimately. Next game, got this one wrong as well. The Broncos and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now this was a game that, listen, I had this on a parlay betting this weekend because I was like, I just don't see how the Buccaneers playing as hot as they had been playing up to that point, hosting especially the Broncos. I think they hosted. Maybe they were on the road. I think actually they were on the road. But either way, no. I think the Bucs were home. And fuck it. They lost that game pretty convincingly. I mean, Denver beat the shit out of them. And Bo Nix had up to that point probably the best game that rookie quarterbacks had this week. Obviously, Jaden Daniels outplayed him on Monday night. We'll get to that. But, Bo Nix looked impressive. He looked solid. I won't say he was super impressive because I'm not super high on Bo Nix as a rookie. I think he'll be kind of like the Mac Jones of this class, maybe a little bit more consistent, though. Maybe he'll have a similar type of productivity for more time than Mac Jones, but I think he has a very defined ceiling in that regard. But yeah, I think this was just a bad game on the part of the Bucs and a good game on the part of the Broncos. I don't see a situation, however, where the Bucs don't bounce back from this, and I also don't. After one game, I'm not ready to do much as far as putting stock into the Broncos. I'm not going to do that. Packers and the Titans. Packers without Jordan Love are undefeated so far. And with Jordan Love, they hadn't won a game, and obviously it was just one game, and it was against the Eagles opener. But I think this is a game that is a telltale sign of the fact that the Packers are a very well coached, very well run team, solid all the way around, and the Titans are just bad. Plain and simple. The Titans really are, at this point, they got to be competing for the worst team in football, right? Will Levis is just giving the team. Will Levis plays quarterback the way a small child plays Madden. He's just throwing the ball, letting go of it, saying fuck it, and just giving it to the other team every time. The Titans are bad, and the Packers are good. It's plain and simple. Even without a starting quarterback, they were far and beyond the stronger, better team. Carolina at the Raiders. I chose the Raiders in this game. Obviously, I got it wrong. The Panthers ended up winning, but even when I made the decision, and maybe I had documented that, maybe I had said it last week, but I bet that when I placed a bet this week on FanDuel, I bet the Panthers, but I bet the money line, and I bet the spread. I didn't bet the money line. Could have. The reason being is because there's a trend in the NFL when a veteran starting quarterback comes into a struggling team that it gives them some juice, and that's what happened with Andy Dalton. This was a bad game for Bryce Young, who did not play, benched going into this week. The offense looked fantastic, looked very productive, very efficient, very solid with Andy Dalton at quarterback. And listen, Andy Dalton at one point in his career was a Pro Bowler on a couple of counts. In this situation, it just makes Bryce Young look bad because Andy Dalton went in there and had a very good game, and Bryce Young in what has it been that he's played? At least a season's worth of games so far. I know he missed a couple last year from what I understand. And he just had not registered any sort of offense really to speak of. And there really weren't even very many moments where you looked at Bryce Young and saw some potential in him yet. So I think this is just a really bad look for Bryce Young. And honestly, a bad look for the Raiders, who I think just capitalized on a team last week in Baltimore that just simply did not come to play last week. yeah, just my biggest takeaway is that's a really bad look for Bryce Young, especially if Andy Dalton can somehow continue success going on the offense. Next game, I did predict correctly, Seattle over Miami. Think that mostly comes down to the fact that Miami doesn't have a starting quarterback, period. Miami's still a good team. Miami's still a solid team. But Seattle is a better team than I originally gave them credit for, although I did see them being competitive and being solid. But Seattle, I mean, they just handled business against a team that didn't have a starting quarterback, and that just is what it is. Their defense is playing very well. Offensively, they're playing relatively efficiently. Got to give them credit. Another game that I got correct was Detroit and Arizona. I said Arizona could be a sleeper in this game, a sleeper pick, but I chose the Lions. Good thing I did because the Lions pretty much beat them up and kind of regained some confidence after a tough loss last week. I keep kicking the camera. I apologize. I'm not gonna go dwell on too much on the wins or the losses. I'm just kind of going through here for the review of the week. Baltimore and Dallas. I picked Baltimore. A lot of people thought that game was a pick'em. I thought heavily that Baltimore was going to win this game. I did think that it was like one of those games like, yes, obviously Dallas could win this game. They're home. They're a good home team. But Baltimore needed this game, and they got this game. And despite the score, it was really lopsided. The defense scared probably every Ravens fan because they were just letting them back into the game with too much time left on the clock. But, man, Dallas, I'm not saying it's time to hit the panic button because there's a lot of season left for a team that should be much better than this. This was a bad game all the way around from them. Offensively, they didn't look dynamic at all. They can't run the ball. Dallas can't run the ball. There's not a running back on that roster worth more than 5 to 10 carries a game max. Right? They can't run the ball. They're one-dimensional. They're not dynamic at all. They couldn't really do very much with a $60 million a year quarterback, one of the top paid receivers in football. The defense, which is supposed to be the highlight of this team, did not look good. The Ravens were running at will. Derrick Henry balled the fuck out. Dallas probably should have thought about paying CeeDee Lamb, paying Dak Prescott back in like the spring, so that maybe they didn't have to pay as much and they could have afforded a guy like Derrick Henry. Then maybe we'd be looking at the Dallas Cowboys like a real legitimate, like, holy shit, they'd probably be 3-0 at this point. Be that as it may, they didn't. The Ravens looked like the much better football team, and as far as I'm concerned at this point in the season, they are the much better football team. Next, you got San Francisco 49ers and the Rams. I didn't think that this was going to happen. I got this game wrong. I thought the Niners were going to beat up on a very injured Rams team. Turns out the Niners are basically just as injured as the Rams. By the way, Christian McCaffrey out for the entire season. Sorry for anybody that drafted him in fantasy. I didn't. If I had the number 1 overall pick, I probably would have. But I'm glad I didn't, I'll tell you that. McCaffrey being out for the year definitely changes a little bit of the feeling of the Niners, even though Jordan Mason had been playing very well. Speaking of fantasy, once again, if you picked up Jordan Mason, you got a top-tier running back for the rest of the year in free agency. I mean, you just did. But the beat-up, broken-up, battered Rams beat up on the beat-up, broken-up, battered-up Niners. A team missing a bunch of starters. I will say, one takeaway I have from this game, Brock Purdy. No, they didn't win this game, but this is probably one of those games where you watch it and you're like, he doesn't have Debo. He doesn't really have Brandon Ayuk. His top receiver at this point right now is Jawan Jennings. He doesn't have Christian McCaffrey. The offensive line's banged up. Kittle's not really playing. And Purdy still looked pretty good. Still looked damn good. I mean, he was dealing. And he found a guy in Jawan Jennings. He had the hot hands and he kept finding them. I think it's time that we stop talking about Brock Purdy as Mr. Irrelevant as far as his draft position, because if this kid wasn't drafted last and he was drafted in the first round, we'd be talking about this kid like he's an NFL great. Just because he was Mr. Irrelevant and he's on a team with a stacked roster means he can't be great. He's great right now, and he's doing it with a weak roster at this point. Maybe not a weak roster, but a very injured, an injury-depleted roster. There's no doubt about that. There's no argument to be made. I don't know if there's very many teams or very many cornerbacks that'll consistently make Jawan Jennings look like a top-tier receiver when the other guys are out. Give it to Brock Purdy, but I got that game wrong. Kansas City and Atlanta, I picked the game right. It was a little closer than I would have anticipated it being. I said it last week, and I see a whole bunch of them people in the media, and I record these videos in advance a lot. Pretty much as soon as week 1 ends, I record this. As soon as the NFL week ends, I record this. I see so many people, professional analysts that are on ESPN, Fox, whatever, saying things that I've been saying. And I will never get credited for it because no one really watches this shit, 1. And 2, what am I getting credit for here? I've been saying now that the Chiefs are the Patriots of this decade, the Patriots of this era. No matter what happens, they just find a way to win. If it's not the defense playing well, then the offense is going to pick it up. If it's not the offense playing well, then the defense is going to pick it up. If it's a balance and somebody makes a mistake, the opposing side is going to make up for it. No matter what happens to the Chiefs, they find ways to win. Are they going to go undefeated? Probably not. And I'm not sure many people are going to predict that to happen. There's going to be a game in here where they don't play well. Because let's be honest, through 3 games, they haven't played great football. Mahomes hasn't been great. He's been okay. He's made some really ridiculous throws a couple of times this season, but they find a way to win. That's just what they do. Jacksonville at Buffalo. I chose Buffalo, and man, that game was over before it started. Trevor Lawrence looks bad. The offense looks bad. The defense looks bad. Doug Peterson's probably going to get fired before the season's end. It is a disaster in Jacksonville. Jacksonville hasn't won a game since Thanksgiving last year. That's a collapse. I mean, they were on track to be a good team last year, very solid, and had just collapsed. And going and starting the season, they look awful. Absolutely awful. All the way around. There's really not a lot of positives in Jacksonville right now. They suck right now. And the Bills are great. The Bills are strong, well coached. Josh Allen and Sam Darnold, and you put a couple other names in there as far as who's so far the MVP this season. Early on, but I mean, the Bills and the Jags right now are just in totally different worlds. And the Bills just annihilated them. Last game. Washington and Cincinnati. Jaden Daniels had the best single game a rookie quarterback has ever had. Maybe that's hyperbole. I don't think so. He had more total touchdowns than he did incompletions. 91% completion percentage. That's efficient as fuck. He ran 2 in. I think he ran 2 and he threw for 1. He looked incredible. The Commanders, although last week against the Giants they didn't get in the end zone, but they've been scoring on every drive. I mean, like, with a rookie quarterback, that's impressive. It doesn't matter how you want to break it down. Right now, as we speak, Jaden Daniels has got to be the favorite for Rookie of the Year. I mean, it's him and Malik Neighbors, right? Who are we going to argue? Maybe Marvin Harrison, maybe Caleb Williams because of what we think he's going to turn into? No, right now it's Jaden Daniels. And I did say that was, what was my prediction? I should have said it was I think I said Xavier Worthy because of the fucking week 1 explosion. And I was like, Jaden Daniels is my prediction for Rookie of the Year. I'm allowed a mulligan. I'm taking it. I should probably take a mulligan on a lot of shit that I predicted in the beginning of the year. But I'm gonna take it on Jaden Daniels is gonna be the Rookie of the Year. But damn. Are the Bengals cooked? Offensively, they didn't look horrible. I mean, they scored. They didn't really punt. But they lost again. I think this is a Zach Taylor issue. I think when you have a team like they have, right? When you look at a team that's got a roster and going into the season have high expectations and for the most part is healthy, just not executing and not playing well, it's got to be coaching, right? I've never been a massive Zach Taylor guy. I'm not saying he should be, excuse me, Jesus. I'm not necessarily saying he should be on the hot seat. But are they cooked? 0-3. That's a horrible start to the season, especially when going into the season, a lot of people had you 2-1, 3-0. We'll move on. We won't dwell too much. We got a lot to talk about, and we're 24 and change into this week's episode. I kind of spoke on my big takeaways from this week. I said that Caleb Williams improved, and he did, and I do expect continuous improvement from Caleb Williams. I said Jaden Daniels, he said he had an unbelievable game. Best rookie quarterback performance I've ever seen single game. And he absolutely deserves to be... I mean, the whole Jaden Daniels has arrived. He has. He's arrived. Is he going to continue to play like that? Probably not. Let's not put unrealistic expectations on anything. But, I mean, he looked fantastic. I said that the Bengals have been disappointing. That was one of my major takeaways. Another major takeaway, I said the Saints. I think I told you. I said Eagles, Saints. The loser of that game is the fraud. I'm going to double down on it. I'm sure the Saints will compete in games all throughout the season, but I'm calling them a fraud. I don't think they're a contender. When it comes to this sports prediction shit, you got to make some predictions that are bold. Maybe that's not the most bold shit. And maybe they come out and they go 9-7, or 9-8, 10-7, something like that, and squeak into the playoffs. They're not a contender. They're frauds. They had a really good start to the season. They're frauds. I also said Andy Dalton made Bryce Young look bad. That's just a fact. I don't really think there's anything to debate there. Just not. Another major takeaway was Minnesota and how they have become so much better than we all expected and are absolutely dominating everybody they're playing. Not just teams like the Giants. The 49ers before they were horribly injured. And the Texans, who are phenomenal. Maybe I'm over-exaggerating how I feel about the Texans. Maybe the Texans aren't as good as I expect them to be. I still feel that way, and I'm going to feel that way until proven otherwise. It's going to take a few games of the Texans playing poorly or losing for me to sell stock on them. I'm just not ready to. And then I spoke about the 49ers injuries. All right. Week 3's in the books. 8-8 in the picks, 28-20 overall. I need to make up for it, but before we get into my predictions for next week's games, which, by the way, I have not even looked at next week's schedule. The only game I know of is Thursday night, where the Cowboys go to MetLife and play the Giants. We'll get to it. I'm not going to get to my picks now, but I'm going to do live picks this week. Previously, I had looked at the games, analyzed them a little bit, and had given my predictions on here afterwards. I'm going to give you my live analysis, so my live predictions as I look at the games. We're going to go into our top 10 teams. Power rankings for this week after week 3. You know how I do it? I do it 10 through 1. I start at 10, I make my way up to 1, but I want to give an honorable mention to one team, and it's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. I said that, I'm going to repeat myself. I said the team that wins proves themselves, and the team that loses that game, Saints-Eagles, is the fraud. And because of that, but I need to see more from them, I have the Eagles just outside the top 10. I had them in the top 10 to start the season. I have them outside the top 10 after not super impressive start to the season. Really the most impressive thing about them has been Saquon Barkley. But I wanted to give them an honorable mention. All right, let's get to the top 10. Despite the loss, I am assuming that they're going to get healthy, hopefully soon. I have the Chargers. Last week, I believe I had them at 5. This week, I have them at 10. They dropped 5 spots, but I still think they're deserving of being on this list. I don't want to over-exaggerate anything week to week. There's a lot of people that I think Chargers were almost all on almost every ranking last week. Were a top 3 team. I wasn't ready to put them in there. And then I look again, and I don't even see them in people's top 10. People are very big on overreactions and exaggerations when it comes to a win or a loss, and some people don't really look at the quality of the win or of the loss or the reason behind a win or a loss, and they put too much stock in something like that just based off of a game. instead of really analyzing it. And I still think that the Chargers are a capable team and a top 10 team, and I think when they're healthy, they're going to continue to win games. I just think matchup-wise, the Steelers benefited from a matchup that did favor them mildly, even though Chargers' offensive line and really their whole offensive identity did fit. But the injuries really screwed them in this game. Speaking of injuries, I got the Niners at 9. I understand they're 1-2. Really ugly 2 weeks for them. Really ugly 2 weeks for them. And their injuries, listen, they're probably not going to be on the top 10 next week. I don't know who they face. We're going to get to that. But they're probably not going to be in my top 10 next week. Because I don't know when these players are coming back. We already know that CMC is out for the year. I do not know when Debo's coming back. I don't know when Brandon Ayuk is going to come back mentally. I don't know when George Kittle is going to make any sort of impact. But they're still a good team. They're still a great team. I'm just not ready to kick them off this list yet. I understand. I should probably have the Eagles at 10 and the Chargers at 9 and have bumped off the 49ers, but I'm going to give it one more week. Moving on, I got the Steelers at 8. They cracked my top 10 finally this year. A lot of people that I know personally, they're Steelers fans, have reached out to me and said, yo, what the fuck? How are the Steelers not? It's because I don't believe in them solidly offensively, even though I'm a Justin Fields supporter and I've been a Justin Fields believer. But they're playing good football. The defense is balling out. TJ Watt is absolutely balling out. And Justin Fields is playing really good. I think at this point, Justin Fields has solidified himself as the starter in Pittsburgh, and he should be. I actually think if Pittsburgh's smart, they would just start shopping Russell Wilson to teams like, I don't know, the Dolphins, the Panthers, somebody like that. But at the moment, because they're 3-0 and they beat a quality team last week, and they're just playing quality football all around and being relatively consistent all the way around, I got to give them the respect that they deserve. They've earned it after 3 weeks. I got the Steelers at 8. At number 7, I got the Seahawks. Excuse me. They played good football. I think beating the Patriots in a game that was more competitive than it should have been is a reason why I'm not super high on them. I don't think that... I'm not super impressed by them, but they are playing just kind of like the Steelers. Quality football, solid football. There's not a whole lot of great teams in the NFL right now, and the teams that are great aren't necessarily playing great. We haven't seen a whole lot of separation as far as different tiers of teams in the NFL right now, and I think the Seahawks are just they're in the position right now where they're going to compete with just about anybody they play against, and because of that, I'm going to give them the credit that they deserve. They have a two-headed monster at running back now. Kenneth Walker, obviously we knew of, and obviously we knew of Zach Charbonnet as well, but he had a great game, and I think that they're going to start utilizing him and Kenneth Walker kind of as a running back tandem to just really run the ball, and I think they should run the ball with a quarterback like Geno Smith, although Geno Smith is playing well, but the Geno Smith hate will never stop for me. I don't care if he wins the Super Bowl and back-to-back MVP seasons. I just don't care. Not a Geno guy. Number 6, I got the Ravens. A lot of people are going to think this is too high. Let me explain. I think the Ravens so far this year have only played one bad game. I understand only 3 games, so 1 out of 3 is not great. But really, has any team, aside from maybe the Vikings, which I'll get to obviously, has anybody else had a perfect start to the season? I mean, maybe the Bills. You know, the Chiefs are 3-0. They haven't played 3 great games. I don't even think they've played 1 great game. Maybe they played their best against the Ravens. But the Ravens played really well and came within an inch of potentially tying the game and competing further. They competed very well against Kansas City in Kansas City. They had a bad game against the Raiders, a very bad game. You gotta claim it. And then they go into Dallas and they play a very good game. So let's kind of shrink this down to reality for a second. Before the season started, I feel like most people would have the Ravens 2-1, right? Some people probably have them 3-0. Some people probably thought they might have beaten the Chiefs in week 1. I didn't. So I think a lot of people would have had the Ravens 2-1 because I think most people thought that they were going to beat the Ravens. Some people might have actually thought that Dallas would beat them. I didn't, but I think that they are at a point right now where a lot of people kind of thought they would be to start the season. Some people probably would have had them 1-2. Tell you what, nobody had them 0-3. It's really just a bad game against the Raiders that I look at. I'm like, but I don't think they're going to do that much throughout the rest of the season. I really don't. Number 5, I got the Texans. Not ready to sell stock on them. Not ready. I'm just not. I think that they're going to be fine. I genuinely do. Call me what you will. I chose them to make it to the AFC Championship game for a reason. They played poorly offensively against Chicago. Not poorly. They just didn't have a phenomenally explosive game against Chicago. But Chicago's got a very good defense. They just did not play well all the way around against Minnesota. But as I said earlier, I think that says more about Minnesota than it does about the Texans. I think that that's just a nod to Minnesota rather than a knock to the Texans. I think the Texans are going to be fine. I'm not selling my stock yet. If I have to, I will. I'm not ready to do it. Number 4, the team that beat them, the Vikings. I have one team that I have above the Vikings. I'm going to get people probably yelling at me for and saying, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about? Relax. The Vikings are a very good football team. So much better than probably anybody expected going into the season. Dominating, great football teams. But just like I said when it comes to the Chargers, or the Ravens, or the Texans, or the Niners, I am not going to overreact too early, good or bad. I'm not going to do it. The Vikings at number 4 is high. The only thing that's going to give me kickback is the team that I have one above them. But before I get to them, Sam Darnold's playing like an MVP. Justin Jefferson is balling the fuck out. Aaron Jones is playing well. The offensive line is playing well. The defense is getting great pressure. I got to put Minnesota at 4. They deserve it. If they keep winning games, they will climb this list. They're already at the top damn near. I'm trying not to overreact. And I think that putting them at 4 is an overreaction. But it's who I put at 3 that's going to give me kickback because of one bad game. I got the Detroit Lions. I had them as my NFC pick to make it to the Super Bowl. And just like I said about the Texans, not selling stock on them, they went out and beat up the Cardinals. They played their best game last week. I think that they're going to be great. I think they're going to continue to win football games. If the Lions played the Vikings later on in the season, which obviously they do, most likely I'm going to choose the Lions. A lot of people are going to, like I said, a lot of people aren't going to like that pick, putting the Lions above the Vikings right now because in the standings, and really, the Vikings have played overall better than the Lions have. The Vikings arguably have played better than any team in the league this year. Them and the Bills maybe. But there's so much criteria that goes into power rankings, like, at least for me, the way I do my power rankings, I look at it from a what have you done for me lately perspective, what do I expect from you going forward perspective, and just a general overall feeling and like the eye test. And that's why I have the Lions over the Vikings, because ultimately I just feel like in the long term, they're going to be the better football team. Although right now, I understand why you think the Vikings are. But this is a power rankings long run too. This is a week-to-week thing, sure, but I'm not just basing this off of 3 weeks of the season. I'm basing it off of a lot of things. Number 2, moving on, because I'm almost 40 minutes in. We still got to get to the week's predictions. Number 2, I got the Bills. Seen a lot of people putting them at 1. I understand. I'm not going to argue with you. But I've seen this movie before. What do I mean by that? Can't talk about number 2 right now without talking about number 1, Kansas City. What I mean by I've seen this movie before, how many times have we seen the Buffalo Bills throughout the entirety of the regular season? Maybe not the entirety, but a lot of time throughout the regular season within the last few years at number 1 several times over the Kansas City Chiefs because the Kansas City Chiefs weren't playing perfect football or very great football. Several times. How many times have they won the Super Bowl? How many times have they beaten Kansas City in the playoffs? None. Point blank, period. Because of that, can't put them at 1. I just can't. The Chiefs are the only team that have not moved, and they're not going to move for a while, probably. The Chiefs are the number 1 team in the league if they keep winning games. Even if they're not winning them pretty or not dominating football teams like the Bills are, head-to-head in the playoffs, most people are going to pick the Chiefs. I'm going to pick the Chiefs. They're this generation's Patriots. If you bet against them, you're probably losing money. Point blank, period. Especially in the postseason. Until further notice, Kansas City's going to be number 1. I have a feeling, and I've said that week 1, I said the definitive top 2 teams in the league was Kansas City and the Niners. Week 2, I said the definitive top 2 teams in the league was Kansas City and the Texans. I think what we're learning is that the definitive best team in the league is the Chiefs. Right now, moving forward, I feel strongly that the Bills are going to be playing like a top 2 team for a few weeks at least. They might be a top 2 team throughout the year. But we'll see, because the number 2 spot, every time I put somebody in the number 2 spot, they lose. So, that's my top 10. Chargers 10, Niners 9, Steelers 8, Seahawks 7, Ravens 6, Texans 5, Vikings 4, Lions 3, Bills 2, Chiefs 1. Just the way that it is for me right now. Let's move on to week 4. After week 4 commences, we'll be at the quarter point of the season. We'll be a quarter of the way through the season. There's 17 games, but we'll be about a quarter of the way through the season. What I plan on doing throughout the season after week 4, at the quarter point, week 8 at the half point, and then week 12 at the 3/4 point, and then the end of the regular season, I'm going to give you guys my superlatives so far, right? So after week 4, when all those games are over, you're going to get a separate video on Saturday where I talk about my season analysis of the year so far. And for instance, who do I think is MVP through 4 games? Who do I think is Offensive Player of the Year through 4 games? Who do I think is Rookie of the Year for 4 games? Whatever it is. But we'll get to that. Now we got to get to our game picks, and I'm seeing this schedule live, by the way. I have not done research on it yet. Not planning on it. And I have not seen any of these games yet. Thursday night is Dallas and the Giants. I'm a Giants fan. It is very hard for me to be objective when picking a Giants game. But I'm the type of Giants fan that never thinks we're going to win. Especially not against Dallas, because I can't remember the last time we did it. I'm taking the Cowboys. I'm not high on Dallas right now. I was super high on them a couple weeks ago. I even said that they were going to make the NFC Championship game. They're not going to. Spoiler. I wanted to say something bold and pick the Cowboys. I was wrong. It's not going to be Dallas. All right? It's not. Maybe they can make up for it. Maybe they turn the season around. It's not going to be Dallas. All right? I was wrong. But they're still better than the Giants. Daniel Jones has played pretty well the last couple of weeks. I don't fucking care. I still kind of want to lose to draft a quarterback, but I would almost rather wait until Arch Manning, you know what I mean, gets, declares for the fucking draft, and we get, one of Eli's his nephew, just fucking. The Cowboys are going to win this game. I know somebody going to the game. Giants fan, gonna be disappointed. Jacksonville, going into Houston. I still am high on the Texans, and I have sold all my stock on Jacksonville. Give me the Texans. And I really, it's a divisional matchup, right? Divisional teams play other divisional teams close. They play them well. Jacksonville's a fucking mess. I'm taking Houston. New Orleans at Atlanta. These are my knee-jerk reactions, people. I did not look at the schedule, like I said. This is gut feeling reactions, gut feeling picks. I said that New Orleans was fraudulent because they lost to the Eagles, and I've said like 4 times already in this episode, whoever lost that game was a fraud. That's the way I felt. I'm gonna double down on it. I'm gonna say Atlanta defends home turf because Atlanta has played relatively decently and has been in close games all throughout the season, and they need this win very badly. Woo! Excuse me. I'm going with Atlanta at home. That could go either way, I suppose, but we gotta be definitive around here. Here's an interesting game, and I'll tell you why. Cincinnati going into Carolina. I told you I didn't think I was going to pick the Panthers at all this season. I should have picked them straight up last week. I had a feeling that was an upset waiting to happen. Cincinnati, I said it, are they cooked? This game will tell you. If there was a game this season that will prove to you if a team is just done before they quit before they started, it's this game. If Cincinnati loses this game, they're cooked. They're done for the year. Write them off. Most people already have. I'm leaning towards it, but I'm not going to sign my name on their death certificate yet. I'll take Cincinnati to finally win a fucking game this season against the Carolina Panthers. But the crazy thing is, I'm not terribly confident in that. I was super confident in the Bengals beating the Patriots at the beginning of the season because I thought the Patriots sucked. They lost. So who the fuck knows? Chicago and the Rams. Man. I'm such a Caleb Williams fan. I really am. I'm a Bears fan. Really. I mean, I'm a Giants fan, but I really like the Bears. If you guys watch the other podcast with Colin, you guys know he's a diehard Bears fan, and he's probably the reason why I like the Bears so much. But they're also just an awesome, historically great franchise that I just really respect and like. I love Caleb Williams. I've been a big Caleb Williams fan. I don't know who to pick here. If I was picking with my brain, I would choose the Rams. Look what they just did to the Niners. But I'm gonna get it wrong. Fine, I'm gonna pick the Rams. But my heart is telling me the Bears. When we come back to this, if the Bears win this game and I come back next week to give you my analysis of the picks of what I got right and wrong, I'm taking this one if I get it wrong. I don't give a fuck what you say. I don't care who gets mad. My heart says the Bears. My brain says the Rams. I'm going to go with my brain here because every time I pick with my heart, I get heartbroken. Okay? I'd rather be pleasantly surprised. Moving on, we got the Vikings and the Packers. That's a good game. That's a good game. Without Jordan Love. If Jordan Love was in this game, I'd probably pick the Packers, but the Vikings are on fucking fire. And you'd think that without Jordan Love, they're bound to lose at least one game. I'll take Minnesota. I've been talking so much today, my throat fucking hurts, so that's why I'm constantly taking sips of this seltzer over here. So please don't mind me. Minnesota starting 4-0. Who would have thought? I think that my main reason for picking Minnesota here, although I've been very impressed at Minnesota and they're deserving of being favored in some games now, but I think my main reason is the lack thereof of Jordan Love, and you got to think that Malik Willis is going to lose a game, and he hasn't played great competition the last 2 weeks. He played the Titans, right? Played the Titans? Who fucking I don't know. I already forgot last week's schedule, and then he beat fucking the Colts, right? Minnesota. Pittsburgh and Indianapolis. We've seen Anthony Richardson against solid defenses this year, and it's not been great. The Steelers have a great defense. I got to go with Pittsburgh. I have to. Denver going into New York to play the Jets. Now, here's an interesting one because a lot of people are starting to... People overreact. I said it a couple times in this episode already. People have a tendency of overreacting in the NFL. 1 week of football can make you forget about a bunch of the previous weeks of football, especially early in the season. Denver beat the Buccaneers. Buccaneers are a good team. Denver is not. It was just one of those games where they got the better of them. One team showed up ready to play. The other team just simply did not. I think the Jets are a good football team. If they get hot, they're going to be a dangerous football team. I don't think the Broncos are going to beat the Jets. I'm taking New York. Philadelphia and Tampa Bay. Now here's an interesting game. Last week, a game that I thought was going to tell us a lot, as I've said it at least 10 times now in this video, was Philadelphia and New Orleans. I think this game is going to tell us a lot as well. Philadelphia and Tampa Bay. This is a rematch of the playoff game that we got last year. It's in Tampa. Tampa's coming off a rough loss. Philadelphia's coming off a solid win. That's probably the toughest game this week to pick right there. I'm looking at the rest of the schedule. That's probably the toughest. If it's not the toughest, it's one of the toughest games to pick. I don't know. I should really get it up to where I can see who's the favorite. Philadelphia. It's probably a really close one. Probably Philadelphia favored. I'll go with Philly. I'll go with Philadelphia. I could definitely see the Bucs winning that game, though. Washington and Arizona, another really interesting game. It'll be a fun game to watch. Kyler Murray and Jaden Daniels. It's like I kind of want to ride the hot hand here. But I'm not gonna. I'm gonna go with the Cardinals. Another game where I really think it could go either way. And Jaden Daniels really impressed a lot of people Monday night, including myself. I mean, I was watching that game and I was like, wow. It was fun to watch. It was really fun to watch. But Arizona, like I said before the season started, I thought that they were going to be a team that's just randomly going to beat teams that you probably wouldn't expect. And I'm not saying Washington's one of those teams that should beat the Cardinals. I think this is actually a pretty even matchup. I'll take the experience of the Cardinals. I'll take Kyler Murray in this particular situation. Probably wrong on that. Niners in New England. I'm not picking New England. Period. I think the Niners will bounce back. Fuck. Brock Purdy gonna play well, I think, in that game for the most part. Yeah, they're missing a bunch of players, but New England just simply is not talented, and the Niners are, even when injured. Kansas City at the Chargers. Now this is why it becomes a little bit of a shame with the injury situation in Los Angeles for the Chargers, because this should have been a phenomenal game, a really good divisional matchup. And I don't know what the status is for all these players going into the game. I hope they're all going to play. Players like Justin Herbert, Joe Alt, Joey Bosa, a couple others. You would hope that these guys are going to play. And that's why it was also kind of a shame that they did not continue and finish the game last week, because I believe they would have beat Pittsburgh, and I think you'd have 2 3-0 teams in the same division going up against each other. Would have been made for a really interesting game. Similar to the fact that I said I probably wouldn't pick in favor of the Panthers all year, or like the Giants, something like that, or like not picking in favor of the Patriots all year either. I don't know that I'm ever going to pick against the Chiefs this year. This is one of those games where I'm close to doing it. My in-laws, my wife, her father, her brothers, my father, obviously my father-in-law, my brother-in-laws, they're all Chargers fans, and it's made me, I've watched a lot of the games because of that, and it's made me a Chargers fan. Like, if I had to pick my 3 favorite teams of football, Giants obviously number 1, and then the Bears and the Chargers would be tied for 2. I love watching them. I've become, like, you when you watch the games and you're surrounded by the fans, you start to understand the fandom of the teams and why they are fans, and it's just fun. And I've got a soft spot for the Chargers, is basically what I'm saying. But I got to pick Kansas City. I got to. I think the Chargers are going to be just fine. I really do. But in the situation that we're at with the injuries, the Chargers are one of those teams that's going to compete for a playoff spot this year. But I don't think they're going to be dominant this year, if that makes sense. Cleveland and the Raiders. Let me tell you, this is probably the only game that I don't have any fucking interest in watching. I could give a shit who wins this game. Neither of them are good teams, right? They both have a tendency to fraudulently beat someone like the Raiders did to the Ravens and like the Browns did to someone last week, and I don't know who the fuck it was. Fuck it, who cares? Bengals, maybe? I don't know. It's hard for me to remember every game, alright, guys? I don't give a fuck who wins this game. I really don't. Man, I don't fucking care. Neither of these teams are worth a shit. Fuck it. Give me Gardner Minshew and the Raiders. Fuck it. I'll take them. This next game is the most interesting game this week. I've said that about a couple of games. I said that the Chargers-Chiefs game would have been. I said that the Eagles and Bucks was going to be super interesting game. This is the most interesting game this week. Bills and Ravens. Most interesting game. I'll tell you what. I'm going to pick the Bills. But don't let the Ravens get hot. If they can... 1-3 is a rough start for them. Yeah, I know. But their schedule is tough. So is the Bills. But right now, the Bills are balling the fuck out. And the Ravens are kind of playing... They played one poor game. And they're competing otherwise. But right now, the Bills are like knocking people out. They're just playing great football. So it's hard for me, even though the Ravens are a team that can absolutely beat anybody, including the Bills. But right now, I'm picking the Bills. I'm going to pick the Bills. That'll be such a good game to watch. I'm excited. I think that's the Sunday night game because I think, again, we have 2 Monday Night Football games this week. One of them I don't fucking care about, and that's the Titans versus the Dolphins in Miami. The Titans have officially moved into that bracket for me of teams that I am not picking probably at all for the rest of the season. I'm taking the Dolphins without Tua, with probably Skylar Thompson. I think, right? I know that's who they've been starting, but are they going to continue to start him is the question. I don't fucking care about this game. It being on Monday night too. Like, who the fuck's going to watch that game over the next one, Seattle and Detroit? Who the fuck is going to put on Tennessee and Miami right now? If you were a Dolphins fan or a Titans fan, maybe. Or maybe before Tua got hurt and you wanted to see the Dolphins absolutely fucking steamroll a horrible team. No one's going to watch this game. Nobody. Sure shit ain't going to be me, but I will watch Detroit and Seattle. And in that game, I'm taking the team that obviously everybody thinks I'm too high on, the Detroit Lions. Competitive game, yes. I think it'll be a good test for the Lions to see are they back, right? Are they that good? Because they haven't looked that good yet. Them beating Seattle will be a good, strong win for them. Maybe not like a holy shit win, but it'll be a good, strong win for them. And I do think that they're going to. But Seattle is competitive. Seattle's got a good defense. They're strong. They're efficient. Game could go either way, but if I'm betting right now, I'm going to bet the Lions. So those are my picks for this week's games. Gotta tell you, I really hope I do better than 8-8 this week. There's been a lot of upsets in the NFL so far this year, so I'm trying not to kill myself too much, go hard on myself too much for my picks here, because I'm overall still not doing too bad. But I really hope this week I do well. You know, I want to have the same type of week I did week 1 because week 1 was fantastic. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. I don't really do outros or intros like that. I just like talking about the games. Next week, after we go and do this same episode where we talk about the picks from last week and how I did and, you know, storylines and major takeaways from the week, and then getting into the following week's predictions, you're also going to get a bonus episode from me next week on Saturday. Most likely Saturday. Could be Sunday morning. We'll see. Where I give out my quarter season superlatives. If my predictions are correct next week, then you would only have 4 teams in the NFL that are undefeated at that point. I always think that's very interesting to see what specific team lasts the longest without losing a game. You know, because obviously there's always going to be at least one team that makes it that further than anybody else as far as an undefeated streak to start the season. if my predictions for week 4 go correctly, then Kansas City, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and Minnesota would all still be undefeated. But yeah, we'll see how that turns out. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. Let me know if there's anything you guys want me to talk about NFL-wise. Any types of videos you want. I have tons of ideas. But during the peak of the NFL season, those types of ideas don't necessarily work. During the like I said, during the peak of the NFL season, I have a lot of ideas for the offseason to keep things interesting when there isn't current games to talk about, because I'm going to be talking football throughout the offseason. I'll probably sprinkle in other sports, I'll touch on them a little bit. But for the most part, I'm a football guy. And, it is what it is. So thank you again for tuning in. Flame me in the comments for my picks. Like, share, subscribe. And we'll see how I do this week when we tune back in next week. How you fucking doing? See you later.